Hello. Hello. Good afternoon, Bonfire Heights. So nice to be here with everyone. I'm having a great time. Thanks for this. My name's Barrett. I'm with 1 Million Lights. We're a nonprofit foundation here based out of Palo Alto that's been doing predominantly solar development work throughout South America, Africa, and Southern Asia. It's actually a beautiful thing that Evan was just talking about. We basically are the California technology side of a similar picture. We've been working doing small solar lanterns, solar health clinics, solar water pumping facilities, and education, school, computer, internet lab kind of things around the world since 2006. We started actually in northern India, but now we have representatives on 3 continents. And we've really moved to a mixed distribution model where we support solar micro business using solar lanterns, and as well as developing renewable energy infrastructure, such as solar-powered off-grid, internet-connected schools, and I think we're up to 7 countries now. So yeah, it's a very integrated model of approaching the energy poverty issues and looking at new solutions using current technology adapted for those markets. So when people ask me what I do, I often cite it as supply chains and seed renewable energy markets around the world. And proud to be on a panel with these also amazing and inspirational leaders. All right.
Maybe we're going around the circle. No one told us, so we'll have to ad-lib up here. My name's David Bloom. I'm from the International Institute for Ecological Agriculture. I've been working in sustainable, actually I don't even call it sustainable, it's regenerative agriculture and solar-based energy since 1990. And I actually worked from the 1970s for little outfits like Mother Earth News. Does anybody remember Mother Earth News from back in the day? Oh, look at those hands go up. Yeah, so that was, the original alternative energy think tank. And nowadays, what we're working on is integrated food and energy solutions for places like, Ethiopia and Kenya and Latin America, and cleaning up bodies of water that are polluted and making energy at the same time, and all kind of fun stuff like that.
My name's Marie. I guess you've heard my story, so I'll pass you to Evans.
You already know my name.
You know me as well. So I think that one of the things that we were going to talk about was interconnectivity between projects in Africa and ways to make things maybe more efficient working together. And it's funny, just since we had the break, we've all been talking about ways that we can all collaborate together, just the 4 of us, just in the last half hour. And that's what I find really exciting about the project that I've been lucky enough to get to work on with Evans and with Marie. My interest was, with the CNN Heroes, was to get those 2 together so that Evans could go to Marie's school and help the kids there learn to make lanterns. So that was one way that I could see doing something right away. But I don't know if anyone else wants to speak about that subject of...
Yeah, I really think that this would be really helpful as we are concentrating on education at our school. And yet, as you know, the children are all orphans. So most of them are coming from the most underprivileged homes where there's definitely no electricity. I know it because I've been in their homes. They have no lights. So having these lamps in their homes will help them to do well, because they'll be able to study at home, take those books and then read at home instead of reading them at school, because at our school we have to make sure that they leave school very early so that before it gets dark, because it's not like your mother or your father comes to pick you up to take you home. So yes, something like this, the solar lamps in our school or lights in our school would be literally a dream come true for us. It will literally light us up, and education will be so much easier for our kids.
Well, I guess I'd like to talk about an interrelated project, basically, which ties together many of the things we're talking about. I was at a conference once where I'm up there in front of the room taking questions, and a woman from Monsanto, and I was bracing myself for this question, and she says, well, yes, your alcohol fuel would actually stop the spread of AIDS. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did you hook those things together? Well, she said it's very simple, because people have to cook. And in places where there's no money, the cooking fuels are wood, primarily, or charcoal, or kerosene, same thing we're talking about. And so people walk and walk and walk for miles, hours many times, to get fuel to bring home for cooking, or in the case of kerosene, lighting. And I'm waiting for the punchline, and she says, and if it's a man walking, the odds of him stopping at a impoverished prostitute along the way are very high, and he brings back AIDS to the village. Or if it's a woman, the chance of being raped on the way is pretty high, and then she brings back AIDS to the village, and then, you know, you're off and running with an epidemic. And so if you were making your fuel, like the power lantern, or you're making alcohol to cook with in your village, you're not exposed to those social risks. And so, although it doesn't seem immediately obvious, cooking and lighting and fuel are major health vectors.
I would just like to bring in a different perspective. Basically, development in Africa, for me, I believe that no one else is going to develop Africa or any other place more than the people who live there. Because we understand the environment much better, and we are in a position to develop much better solution. As much as the European countries went through the 3 stages of development, we believe that Africa and most of the other the developing world will jump 1 stage and basically go into an industrialization directly. And I've always argued that organizations based in other countries who want to do projects in Africa should first of all understand the environment in Africa, should be able to work with local organizations for them to be successful. Because I'll take a simple example that we have so many lights are being manufactured here in California. But at the end of the day, what they'll tell the public here in America, or tell the public everywhere else, is that they're making these lights for the poor in Africa. But actually, they're not making those lights for the poor at the end of the day, because they come to Africa, to Kenya, and the people who will buy them are actually not the poor people. But what they're telling the world is that we are manufacturing this. Actually, they'll call low-cost lights for the poor, which. And because they don't understand the environment, they think someone who can afford to buy a $40 lamp or $30 lamp is actually poor. In the context of developing countries, that person is not poor. That is a person who at least probably he's employed as a teacher or a nurse or something. So that's why I believe that it's important to bring out for all organizations to be able to work with the organizations who understand the environment and local communities for results to be achieved, so that we don't go through the cycle of doing the same thing for years, and yet the results, we are not seeing the results at all.
Yeah, from my experience distributing now in the 20,000 range of solar lights, one thing that came a recurring theme was the generation of local income. As Evan's organization is talking about, one of the big arrogances I feel of the international aid community is lack of understanding that the community knows its needs best, and that it's not a lack of knowledge of what they want, it's a lack of affordability. I think a book called Out of Poverty by Paul Polak, actually I'll cite, is a great source of information discussing how the idea of giving away something to get out of poverty doesn't really make any sense, because you're not generating wealth and you're not establishing value. So with 1 million lights, I remember in our first distributions, we would just give away the lights to any group of, orphans, students, people we felt were truly in need. But we found quickly that then the next day, many other members of the community that weren't part of that distribution group for whatever reason would approach us saying, I would like a light. I have kids at home that could breed by it, or we have to tend our cattle in the evening, or different things that come up. But we didn't have any mechanism, because one of the downsides of the nonprofit sector is we raise funds, and then we go do projects, and then we're out of money again, because we've done all our projects and we don't generate any income from our activities. So it doesn't allow for a model that approaches the true need. I think a great quote was one of my distribution partners in Ethiopia was joking with me about my organization, 1 Million Lights, and saying there's actually over 50 million people in Ethiopia without access to the electrical grid. 1 million lights isn't near enough. And when you realize the scope of these problems and how, although they have a local nuance, they are somewhat universal problems of lack of access to basic human resources, we have to generate the local income to empower the communities to use the technologies that are appropriate and leapfrog the mistakes of the industrial petrochemical energy era and move forward, just as the cell phone, I think, is an inspiring story about development and throughout the world and its ability to replace landlines with really no intermediary transition of landlines. I think distributed small-scale renewable energy networks operated, maintained, and profited by local people, communities, community groups, and companies represent probably the most beneficial adaptation of the current economic model and a real success of our society to be able to evolve the wisdom that did come from generations of labor into something that's appropriate for the problems we're facing today.
I'd like to add just a quick comment to that, which is, it's in Ethiopia, you got to realize you've got a country that's roughly half the population of the United States. 60% of the villages and towns in Ethiopia have no road going to them, so they can't even get kerosene delivered most of the year because it turns to mud during the rainy season. And that the entire country has no grid, and that everyone is using generators for electricity. And so every bit of power you can produce with something like what Evans has done is absolutely critical. And of course, when it comes to cooking, the same problem is true as we saw in some of the earlier stuff between wood or kerosene being needed to cook food and consuming up to half the daily income just to have the energy to cook your food. So the problem is not supplying cars in Ethiopia or something as frivolous as that. It's helping people cook and light their homes, and that's up to 70 or 80% of the total energy used in the country. And what's very promising is our places like Ethiopia, the government recognizes the need and is in support, even though the mechanisms of getting that support out to the community are a bit kludgy and still in progress to being implemented. But around the rest of the world, that need for these other majorly important ways of using energy other than transportation are well understood.
Yeah, one of the things about Evan's project that I really liked was the fact that you think a lot of people, when I told them that in the U.S. that he gives the lanterns away, they immediately go, well, he needs to sell them. If they can buy the kerosene, they can buy the lanterns, and if you're not having them buy them, they're not invested in it. And the reality is it takes him months working with these villages just to be able to give them 50 lanterns. There are so many different tribes, different languages. He's got lots of translators going on. Just the logistics of going to make the contact at these villages that are hard to get to, and then create a level of trust because they've been told so many things up till before that never come true. So that takes a lot just to get that part and then to get the lanterns. But the fact that he had come up with that way to work with the women's groups in order to pool the money saved, because if it was just individual households saving the money, they still would have a hard time generating enough to do something. So that was it's such a simple thing, but when you see it, it's pretty amazing how well that works. And then he wants to go further in training the youth groups, which you could talk more about.
But also, when you look at what you're doing, we've been able to learn a lot of experiences along the way, and one day I was telling someone that pregnant mothers in Africa have been delivering in villages for years. If kids were dying because of the mothers delivering at home instead of hospitals, then probably there will be no population at all. But what you'll find everyone is concentrating on is trying to get all the pregnant mothers to deliver in hospitals, instead of helping the midwives in the villages to deliver in a much improved way. So that's the difference. That's what I see as a difference between looking at the conditions, understanding the conditions, and solving the solution. So you can spend $1 million doing public awareness on letting mothers go to hospitals, but then mostly because people in Africa are very healthy. They work through when they're pregnant. They actually deliver when they are going to the market center or they are tilling the land and they deliver. So they don't have long days of labor. And so if someone wants to deliver and the hospital is 1 hour away, even if she was willing to do that hospital, and there's a midwife who is next door, which is the best option there. But then you can spend that $1 million doing public awareness, on helping people that pregnant mothers need to go to hospitals, all that, instead of spending $5,000 educating the midwives in the villages to deliver in a much better way, in a more healthy environment, to teach the mothers not to breastfeed if they have HIV. And that is the approach that I believe that organizations working in any sector, whether it's in health, in education, in any kind of development work in Africa, should take by, for example, I can't come here in California and pretend that I know how to solve the problems here the best way. And I cannot go to Malawi, as much as it's Africa still. I cannot go from Kenya and go to Malawi and pretend now I have the best solution for Malawi. Marie, because she works in Malawi and she has a school there, if I want to start a school in Malawi, it's much better for me to go to Marie and ask her, how have you been doing it and what results have you achieved and what are the challenges? Then we can work together and set up 10 more schools. So I believe that that is what has been lacking when it comes to development in Africa, in South America, for the last, I don't know, maybe 100 years. That's what has been happening, because a lot of money is generated. It goes into, some of it goes into government, some of it goes into international NGOs. But at the end of the day, you'll never see these results in the villages. Like for me, when I was growing up, most of the villages I've seen, they've remained the same for years. And nationally and internationally, when I come here, I'm in New York or I'm in London, I'll hear people talking about all these issues they're doing in Africa. So I wonder, which Africa are they talking about? Because I never see these things. So that's... So, and of course the dynamics also. For people for us who are working in Africa also, we face a lot of challenges. A simple thing is like the things like security threats which we have to deal with every day, because as you know, a lot of people thrive in leadership because of lack of access to knowledge. So if you are promoting education the way Marie is doing, no one will want the people to be literate enough to be enlightened. So you'll always get forces to try and bring down what you're doing. So there's so many challenges you will face when you are an African doing work in Africa.
Thank you, Evan. We actually have a few more moments. Do we have any questions in the audience? Hal, I'll be right over there.
I was wondering to this gentleman and Evans, if you find there are special interests that are threatened by what you're doing, maybe the kerosene industry or other groups that are profiting, that are losing money because of the distribution of the solar lamps, and what you're doing about that if it is a problem.
I'll tell you, the contrast is if you were to come to most of the African countries and you come start doing something there, you'll be treated like an egg. And for me, working there, I'll be treated like trash. That is what happens. Because of the culture that has been developed over the years, where governments are benefiting funds from loans, taking loans from World Bank and other institutions and misappropriating funds. And so when this happens is that they can know that when you're doing a project there, it's hard for someone to know the impact of the project. But for me, it's easier for someone to check out the impact, because you can walk into an office and someone tells you, we've been able to provide cooking stoves in 1,000 homes in a village in northern Zambia. Probably you talking to someone in a city, you don't even know where that village exists. So if someone tells you, probably you'll believe that's actually what's happening. But in simple, we've been, like for me personally, I've been able to receive threats. And the reason is that because we're doing our project at the community level, when the communities, the people in the community see the change, they get enlightened, and they want now they start focusing, and they tell the people in leadership that now they've seen what real development is. And of course, no one who's in power never likes that. So that's something that I constantly go through.
I also, just riding on that, think that there's not only competition from other players in the energy market, other forms of energy, there's actually an inherent inability in the energy industry to approach a lot of the developing markets seriously. And there's a lack of products and knowledge and even desire on a part of a lot of the big energy companies, because they don't see the way to monetize those markets properly. So even internally within the renewable energy industry, there's a lot of outside problems and obstacles that represent the way the market is now here and what's been successful, and the way that we're going to have to redesign all of these products and applications to be appropriate to the places where the solar engineers and CEOs aren't from. And they don't really have the local knowledge to make the products that's really appropriate. So it's critical that we have the local voice in the design that isn't represented now in any solar company I know of, and is only seen in small organizations that, struggle to get basic funding, while, you have giant international solar companies producing billions of dollars or misappropriating it occasionally.
And as for me, on the threat level, has been that I have publicly gone out and talked about Malawi having 10 people die of AIDS. Our country doesn't want people to know that. Many African countries do not want people to know that, especially the ones who are getting help from the outside and the money is not going to where it's supposed to be going. So I have had like a certain online Malawian papers really call me names and criticize me, saying everything is okay in our country, but it isn't. So those are the bits that I have to be quiet, supposedly to be quiet about, but it's what's happening, so.
You know, I think what Evans was saying is true throughout all levels, that you have to pay attention to what's happening right in front of you on the ground. And many things that you might assume, you shouldn't assume. You shouldn't go in with any assumptions. So for instance, I'm going to give it to you from another end of the spectrum. We put on a conference for folks from Africa about alcohol fueling cooking. And the Nigerian National Oil Company sent 4 people to our workshop. We were nervous about this because we made the assumption that those guys were the enemy. I mean, that's what the question was, right? Has there been pushback? And what we found out was you can't make assumptions. Yes, these guys were in favor of oil and selling all they could, but not to Nigerians, because they couldn't sell kerosene to Nigerians at the full price because no one could pay it and there'd be a riot, so they had to subsidize the sale of kerosene to Nigerians. So they loved the idea of alcohol coming in and replacing this subsidized cooking fuel so they could steal the money for themselves. In other words, they could sell that kerosene overseas for more money. And so whatever you think you know or assume about the energy market when you go into a situation, don't assume. Sit there and listen. I never, ever fail to get respect from people I'm working with when they say, "What are you here to do for us?" And I say, "I'm here to listen." That's the first step.
One more question.
To any of you, many of you are under the umbrellas of a 503C, I believe. What are any drawbacks from the 503Cs, and what are the benefits of the 503C?
For me, it has helped a lot because, first of all, I opened the 501c here in America, and I filed all my taxes over here. That way, my donors, I do not have any donors in Malawi at all. Malawi, the money that Malawi has, they put into the education system. I've approached the Malawian government and asked even for exercise books. And no, so all the donations come from people over here. And when people want to donate, they all ask for their tax exempt. So that's very helpful for me. It's really, I think most of the money that I've had donated is because of the 501c. Yeah.
The best thing about the 501c for me was that I got to work with Evans. But we decided not to file one for sustainable development for all U.S. There's a nonprofit in Kenya that is sustainable development, and it's Kenyan. It's in Nairobi. It's run in Kenya by Kenyans. If we did the 501c here and had that U.S. name, it starts to dilute that and gives the appearance that it's a U.S. based, and that's really not true. It's also very hard to get a 501c when you have an established nonprofit in another country, especially Africa. It would have been very difficult, and the reality is with a 501c, we have an umbrella relationship with another 501c that is our financial partner. So we still have to do all of the accounting. People can still donate to us and get tax exempt, but the 501c number is under the umbrella organization, which is called Village Volunteers, and they are based in the U.S., and they send their primary mission is to send volunteers to different programs like Evans and Marie. So they fit with what our work is, and it allows us not to have to go through the hassle of a 501c filing here. If you're not really going to be bringing in at least $100,000 to $1 million of donations, it's really not worth it if you can do the umbrella, because the umbrella will take a 4% is, anywhere between 4 and 8%, depending on what they're doing. But they write the grants for you. They do everything else. So.
I'm recently tangling with the IRS myself right now because we've been under an umbrella like you were talking about. Now there's another organization for us. And when we applied to be our own 501c, the IRS was sitting there waiting for us. We have been through the most incredible legal ringer, and our lawyers don't even believe what we're being put through. So when you take a look at doing anything that's going to drive you toward economic self-sufficiency, for instance, any kind of project that will start to pay for itself, those commercial aspects can make you invalid, and it takes about 9 months to a year to get it. So if you're thinking of moving quickly, you will not be able to move quickly nowadays in the environment to get your 501c3. And quite frankly, there aren't enough donors, and we're all going to the same people for the money, and the best thing to do is to figure out how to make your project economically feasible and get investors. There's more of those than there are donors. That's not to say you shouldn't be a nonprofit for a lot of good reasons, but not U.S. money. There are European funds that will fund 501c3s that are based in other countries that are effective and can get you funding, but not here, not anymore, not really.
Thank you, guys. We're going to take just one moment just to wrap it up. Guys, maybe word of wisdom, one sentence of the future.
I just wanted to say something about what Evan said a little while ago. It's about Africa. It is important that you come in and you work with us in Africa. You come to learn, come to see what is going on there and work with us, and then we can help each other instead of taking the ideas all over the world and saying, this is what you're going to give to us, when you don't know what is going on the ground, because that's what even happens at my school. Thank you so much, and just continue. We do need, there are not much donors, but we do need that. This is how we live. Literally, we live by your donations. So, keep it up, and thank you.
Thank you, Barrett. Thank you, David. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Evans. Thank you, Elaine.